In Wall Street, success and confidence walk hand in hand, but betrayal may arise where it is least expected. Ethan Collins, a respected trader, will see alliances break and interests collide. Amid power plays and ethical choices, his reputation will face the most challenging test of his life. The clock read 6 a.m. when Ethan Collins adjusted his navy blue tie in front of the mirror in his Upper East Side apartment. The first rays of sun came through the window, illuminating a space that was organized but unpretentious, very different from the image people had of a successful Wall Street trader. At 36 years old, Ethan held an enviable position, respected by his team, the owner of a glass-walled office with a privileged view of the skyscrapers, and a reputation that had survived crises and the crossfire of the financial market. As he ran his fingers through his slightly graying brown hair at the temples, Ethan observed his reflection attentively. Despite the perfectly aligned suit and impeccable appearance, his green eyes bore signs of sleepless nights and choices that had cost him relationships and peace. The divorce 3 years ago, the distance from his 8-year-old daughter who lived with his ex-wife in another state, and the recent death of his mother had left marks invisible to his colleagues, but painfully present for him. In the minimalist kitchen, he prepared his usual strong and unsweetened coffee. On the marble countertop rested the cup his mother had given him when he entered college for economics with the faded inscription, "The truth always finds its way." This mantra, repeated countless times by Elizabeth Collins while she raised her son alone in a modest apartment in Queens, had become Ethan's moral compass. "Honesty is non-negotiable, my son," she used to say, a dedicated nurse who worked double shifts to ensure her son's education. "People come and go, money is lost and won, but your character is permanent." As the subway cut through the city, Ethan mentally reviewed the presentation he was to give that morning. Archer and Gold Investments was on the brink of closing a $120 million deal with European investors. It was the opportunity to establish the company as a global benchmark, and Richard Hamilton, the CEO with a stern demeanor and piercing voice, had entrusted him with leading the negotiations. At the Wall Street station, the buzz of the crowd in dark suits and carrying executive briefcases created a familiar symphony. Ethan felt his phone vibrate. It was a message from his daughter, Sophie. "Good luck with your important meeting, Daddy. Love you." Attached was a photo of her holding a drawing where 2 stick figures, a big one and a small one, smiled under a bright yellow sun. A genuine smile crossed Ethan's face, momentarily softening the lines of worry. The imposing Archer and Gold building, with its glass and steel facade, mirrored the blue sky of that decisive Tuesday. In the panoramic elevator, Ethan encountered Michael Turner and Daniel Ross, the colleagues he considered his closest friends at the company. "Ready for the big day, brother?" Michael asked, patting his shoulder. Tall, athletic, and with a charismatic smile, Michael was the extrovert of the trio, always ready with a joke or a story to break the ice with clients. "Born ready," added Daniel, adjusting his thin-framed glasses. More reserved and analytical, Daniel was known for his meticulous attention to detail and his ability to identify patterns where others saw only random numbers. The three had met during the company's trainee program 7 years ago. Over quick coffees between meetings and late-night work sessions that stretched into the early hours, they formed a bond that seemed unbreakable. They called each other brothers, shared secrets, and celebrated each other's victories. "Let's ensure this together," Ethan replied, feeling the comforting familiarity of the team he had built. "The Europeans are demanding, but we have the best numbers to present." On the 43rd floor, Richard Hamilton's office was the embodiment of corporate power. Polished marble floors, dark wood furniture, and carefully selected abstract art pieces. The adjacent meeting room, all in glass, offered a privileged view of the city that seemed to bow at the feet of the skyscraper. Ethan entered holding his meticulously organized notebook. The environment exuded power. A solid wood table, glass-paneled walls reflecting the city bathed in the morning sun, neatly aligned ties and laptops open in front of the directors. Everything seemed calculated, each gesture measured like pieces of an invisible chess game. Richard Hamilton, a 60-year-old man whose gray hair contrasted with his piercing gaze, nodded briefly for Ethan to take a seat. Alongside him, the entire board of directors, quite unusual for a preliminary presentation. It was then that Ethan noticed there were no slides prepared, no documents on the table related to European investors. Michael and Daniel sat discreetly in the opposite corner of the room, avoiding his gaze. "Mr. Collins," Richard said, crossing his arms over his chest, "there are serious allegations against you. Contracts signed without proper approval, manipulated fees, excessive risk in the name of the firm." The silence cut through the air like a blade. Ethan felt the ground shaking beneath his feet and his heart racing. It felt like falling into a bottomless abyss while everyone watched impassively. "That's not true," he replied, his voice shaky but firm. "All my reports are documented and clear. Ask the clients. I've never made a decision that compromised the ethics of this company." It was then that Michael raised his voice. "We found evidence on the internal servers. Ethan has been acting on his own, putting the company in a vulnerable position." Daniel added, without lifting his eyes from his own fingers tapping on the table, "For years, he bypassed protocols. It's time to face the consequences." The words hit him like stabs. Colleagues he called brothers now crucified him before the CEO and the board. The room turned into a courtroom. The suspicious glances of the directors weighed heavier than the cold marble floor. "Can I see this supposed evidence?" Ethan asked, trying to maintain composure as his world crumbled. "We have already reviewed everything extensively," Richard cut in. "Your explanations can come later with the legal department present." Ethan took a deep breath. In his mind, he saw the serene face of his mother, Elizabeth, who, even in the face of hardship, never gave up her dignity. She used to say, "When men knock you down, remain on your knees before God and your conscience." "If you believe in this," he said, with a dignity that surprised even the most cynical in the room, "I am willing to face the judgment. But the truth always finds its way, as my mother used to say." Richard closed the folder forcefully, the sound echoing like a final verdict. "You are suspended until further notice. Hand over your badge and password on your way out." "This meeting is over." Ethan left in silence, carrying only his folder and the photo of Sophie he kept in the drawer. The glass doors closed behind him like a final verdict. In the elevator, the reflected image showed a ruined man. Impeccable suit, but a heart shattered by the betrayal of those he considered family. In the lobby, a light rain began to fall, as if the sky shared his sorrow. Ethan wandered aimlessly through the streets of Manhattan, observing the hurried faces passing by him, each with their own dramas, their own invisible battles. On that day, Wall Street followed its relentless course, traders shouting numbers, contracts changing hands, fortunes being made and lost in seconds. To Archer and Gold, Ethan was already a closed chapter, a name to be removed from the corporate website. In his apartment, Ethan faced the oppressive silence. On the coffee table, the picture frame with a photo of him and Sophie in Central Park smiled cheerfully, contrasting with the darkness he felt. Beside it, the cup with his mother's mantra seemed a cruel irony. He sat at the desk and began reviewing every document, every contract from recent years. If evidence had been fabricated against him, he needed to understand how and why. Hours passed as he delved into spreadsheets and archived emails. Near midnight, the puzzle started to make sense. A pattern of suspicious transfers and contracts emerged, but it did not lead to him. It pointed directly to Michael and Daniel. "They used my electronic signature," he murmured to himself, "and they've been diverting commissions for at least 2 years. The motive was clear. The European contract represented a guaranteed promotion, and with Ethan out of the way, the path would be clear for them to take control and continue their scheme unimpeded. The next morning, while preparing a bitter coffee, Ethan considered his options. He could strike back immediately, exposing the fraud, but without access to the company's internal systems, his evidence was limited. He needed to be strategic. It was when his phone buzzed with a notification from LinkedIn. Klaus Weber, the German investor responsible for half of the European contract, had sent him a message. "We need to talk. Call in 10 minutes. During the video call, the German executive was direct. "I heard about your suspension. It's unacceptable. We work with Archer and Gold because of you, Ethan. Your transparency and ethical approach were what attracted us." "I appreciate the trust, Klaus, but the situation is complex," Ethan replied, trying to maintain professionalism. "Not for me," Weber stated with his characteristic frankness. "I have sent an email to the board. Without you in leadership, there will be no signing on our part." He had barely ended the call when the phone rang again. It was Alina Price, the relentless British investor known for her calculating coldness. "Collins, I've never been interested in corporate politics, only in results. And you have always delivered exactly what you promised without unpleasant surprises. My trust is in you, not the institution. I won't negotiate with anyone else." Throughout the day, the messages multiplied. One by one, the clients Ethan had cultivated through years of honest work and transparent communication expressed their support. They were not asking for favors or special rates. They simply recognized the value of integrity in a world where it had become a rare commodity. At Archer & Gold, panic set in. Investor emails circulated through the corridors like wildfire in a dry forest. Michael and Daniel, once so confident in their conspiracy, now walked with their heads down, avoiding the gaze of their colleagues. Richard Hamilton, who had decreed the suspension without proper investigation, found himself cornered by the unexpected strength of the client's reaction. By the end of the day, the inevitable phone call came. Richard's voice sounded almost unrecognizable, stripped of its usual arrogance. "Collins, there was a misunderstanding. We'd like to discuss your immediate return." In his modest apartment, Ethan received the news with conflicting emotions. His voice faltered, and for a moment tears threatened to fall. But they were not tears of revenge or petty satisfaction. It was relief. The years of sacrifice, of lonely nights studying market trends while others socialized, of making ethical choices when the easy path was available, had not been in vain. The clients did not buy his loyalty, they recognized it. They defended not just a competent manager, but a man who kept his word when it had a personal cost. That night, before making his decision, Ethan called Sophie. His daughter's animated face on the video call lit up the room more than any lamp could. "Daddy, you look tired," she observed with the surprising insightfulness of children. "I've had some tough days at work, dear," he replied honestly. "Grandma always said that after the storm comes the rainbow," Sophie said, showing another colorful drawing. "I made this for you to remember." Those simple words, echoing the wisdom of Elizabeth Collins, touched Ethan deeply. His mother never knew financial success, but she lived and died with a clear conscience and surrounded by people who genuinely loved her. Days later, Ethan returned to Archer & Gold. The marble and glass lobby, which for years had represented achievement and belonging, now seemed just like any other building. There were no applauses, no grand speeches. Just uncomfortable glances from those who had condemned him without proof and discreet smiles from the few who stood by him even in moments of uncertainty. Michael and Daniel were no longer there. An internal audit initiated after the accusations against Ethan revealed the embezzlement scheme they had devised. Their betrayal did not need to be punished with shouts or public humiliation. The weight of the truth already crushed them. Ethan entered again the glass room where, days before, his career had almost ended. The city below seemed the same, yellow taxis like confetti scattered among towering buildings, hurried people following their routines. But for him, everything had changed. He walked to the table, placed the notebook binder in front of him, and took a deep breath. Richard entered, followed by 2 executive directors. The CEO seemed different, less imperious, more cautious. "Collins, we want to formalize your promotion to Director of International Operations. The European contract is secured, thanks to your influence." Ethan watched the man for a few moments. "I appreciate the offer, Richard, but I need a few days to consider my future here." The surprise on the CEO's face was evident. No one refused promotions on Wall Street, especially after such a dramatic rehabilitation. "Of course," Richard replied, disconcerted. "Take all the time you need." When he was alone, Ethan approached the window. The setting sun painted the skyscrapers in golden and pink hues. He didn't know if he would stay there or follow another path, perhaps opening his own consultancy or accepting one of the offers that were already starting to come in. But he carried something more significant than any million-dollar contract, the certainty that integrity is the safest investment. That night, upon arriving home, he found a package at the front desk. Inside the well-wrapped box was a new mug with a printed message: "The truth always finds its way." Along with it, a note from Sophie: "To replace the one that broke, Dad, Grandma would be proud of you." And in silence, Ethan gave thanks, because he understood that amid the greed and betrayals of Wall Street, there was still room for justice. And that time, like invisible hands, always brings the truth to light for those who have the patience to wait. His fate remained open, but one thing was certain. The trust of the clients was more than just a professional vote. It was a reminder that when everything seems lost, faith in oneself and dignity can transform defeat into a new beginning. And no position or salary could buy the peace of laying one's head on the pillow knowing that he remained true to the values his mother had taught him on the modest streets of Queens. For Ethan Collins, integrity was never for sale. And that was his true wealth.